All right, did you take attendance? Because you should do that first and then take the notes. Today's notes are going to be about the 4 little habitats that you can find within the kelp forest, but more fun about the creatures that you can find living there, especially gastropods. So I hope you enjoy it. See you in a little bit. Okay, you're going to handwrite your notes and take pictures of your handwritten notes and submit them to Schoology, or you're going to write them in Notability and then submit them to Schoology. But either way, your notes are handwritten, and you're starting by labeling your notes Kelp Forest, Part 2, nice and ginormous across the top for me. Okay, so let's take a look at this mature kelp forest. And much like the terrestrial forest, the sunlight gets caught by the trees that are the tallest. And here, they're not trees, they're not plants, they're protists, right? But the canopy layer, that top layer up at the top, gets all the sunlight. And it's cool that it helps the little blades down below because it does the translocation and sending the nutrients throughout the plant, the protist, okay? But really, there's 4 major habitats in a kelp forest, and that makes it the most diverse habitat for all of the temperate zone marine animals. So let's talk about these 4 habitats. The top layer is called the canopy, and the blades will rest on the surface of the water. The mid-story is where you'll find your fish swimming along the stipes and the fronds. The holdfast is where it's holding fast to the sea floor. There's even opening in the haptera where the creatures can crawl through. And then, of course, the seafloor itself provides its own habitat. So there's a picture of the canopy. What kind of creatures can we find in the canopy? Sea otters, sea stars, sea urchin, butterfly perch, octopus, and one of my favorite creatures ever, the weedy sea dragon. His camouflaging ability in the kelp forest is amazing. Alright, moving down to the mid-story habitat, you'll find your mollusks like octopus and cuttlefish. You'll also find seahorses and jellyfish and rays and all sorts of crustaceans. And most definitely you will find this lovely orange fish called the Garibaldi fish. Super, super famous. All right, we started to learn about mollusks in the last unit. We're going to learn a whole lot more about them in this unit. You remember that they are the soft-bodied animals, that most of them have that external skeleton. Not the cuttlefish, not the octopus, and not the sea hare, but most of them do. Okay, so there's your canopy, there's your mid-story. The holdfast is down at the bottom, holding fast to that sea floor. Here you're going to get some more of those creepy crawlies where you got your isopods and your crabs and your sea urchins and your polychaete worms. Ew. Okay, sponges and some brittle stars. Now, the seafloor habitat itself, you got all sorts of echinoderms. The spiny skinned creatures like the sea urchins and the sponges and the sand dollars and the sea cucumbers and feather stars and brittle stars. You'll also get some of your crustaceans like your lobster. So, you know, you're going to have a variety. But I would be remiss if I talked about the kelp forest and did not talk about and teach you about sea otters. Not only because they're super freaking cute, but because they're a keystone species in this kelp forest ecosystem. So, we did learn about the order Carnivora earlier when we learned about polar bears and pinnipeds. Remember, our pinnipeds are our fin-footed creatures, the seals, the sea lions, and the walruses. But the sea otters and the polar bears are in the same order. They just are. It's kind of weird, right? So they're in the domain Eukarya because their cells have a nucleus. They're in the kingdom Animalia because they're multicellular and they're heterotrophs. They have to eat. They are in the phylum Chordata because they have a spinal column, and they're in the class Mammalia because they are warm-blooded, they have a 4-chambered heart, they give live birth, they feed their young milk, and they have fur or hair at some point in their life. So sea otters and polar bears are marine mammals that belong to the order Carnivora. And the sea otter is the cutest freaking smallest marine mammal ever. Look at him. He looks like he's plotting the end of the universe. All right, so Sea otters don't have blubber, so how do they stay warm? They have really, 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 really dense fur, the densest fur at all, and it traps air against the body of against their body, and it keeps them insulated. And they were hunted for fur nearly to extinction, and this caused a huge problem in the kelp forests. But we'll get back to that later. So when they go to sleep, it's super cute. They roll around in the kelp, and it just anchors them in there, and it's kind of adorable. All right, sea otters are only found in the Pacific Ocean, and they inhabit the nearshore environments to dive to the seafloor to forage on mollusks, crustaceans, and echinoderms. Most specifically, they like to eat urchins, and they eat 25 to 30% of their body weight every day. So like I said, they're a keystone species, and to remind you about what a keystone species is, it's one of those species that is important to maintain the balance of an ecosystem. So, when the sea otters were hunted to nearly extinction, the kelp forest was eaten by the sea urchins, and it started to just float away because they ate the holdfasts and they weren't attached to anything, and then bye-bye entire ecosystem. And so, with the sea otters in place, they eat the sea urchins, they keep the sea urchin population in check, and ta-da, balanced ecosystem. So, several hundred years ago, our Russian sealers discovered large populations of sea otters that lived in the kelp forests in the northwest coast of the United States, like between Alaska and Russia. And because of their beautiful, warm, amazing fur, they were harvested to the point of near extinction, and the kelp beds began to disappear. So, if you see this is what's called a barren, and it's a sea urchin barren, and it's because they have gone nuts and they've eaten all the kelp and the kelp has floated away. So it's really important to maintain the ecosystem balance. So you can see there is a kelp forest with sea otters, and there is a barren without sea otters. So during the past 50 years, marine biologists have documented the return of many of these kelp beds because populations of sea otters are now a protected species. It's against the law to kill them. So they are keeping the sea urchin population in check, and we're getting some balance. Thank you, good sir. We love you. All right, now I want to talk to you some more about mollusks. Okay, they're in the domain Eukarya because their cells have a nucleus. They're in the kingdom Animalia because they're multicellular, and they're heterotrophs, and they're in the phylum Mollusca. And mollusca is a fancy word that just means soft. Yeah, I know. Amazing. Sometimes it actually makes sense. So, mollusks are soft-bodied invertebrates covered with a protective mantle that may or may not form a hard calcium carbonate shell. Okay, 23% of all marine organisms are mollusks. They're really diverse. They vary in size and anatomical structure and behavior and habitat. And there's 7 different classes of mollusks. So, what do they all have in common? So they all have a foot, a mantle, and a visceral mass. The muscular foot is what they use for locomotion. It's how they move. The mantle is that tissue that covers the body of the mollusks. Now, in some of them, it's going to secrete the shell over the visceral mass. The visceral mass is the part that holds all the internal organs. Think of it like our rib cage. Okay? So, the space between the mantle and the visceral mass is called the mantle cavity, and here's where the gills are found. All right? Most mollusks do have separate sexes, so there are boy and girls of each ones. Now, I did say they all had a foot, but in some of them, it's been modified or evolved over time. So like in the octopus, the tentacles are what its muscular foot was. In the squid, those tentacles are what its muscular foot was. You can check it out right here. Look, the nautilus is one of the creepiest, freaky creatures ever. He swims backward and bumps into things. I think that's kind of funny. Almost all mollusks are marine. Some do live in freshwater, and some, like gastropods like snails and slugs, are land-based. So they do have a well-developed head region with sensory structures to detect light, okay? Or they can have super complex eyes, but like the cuttlefish has like crazy amazing eyes, and he's just amazing. And then like look at this scallop. All those little blue dots, those are eyes. That's kind of creepy to me, right? Most mollusks have these mouths with these things called radulas. They're tongues that bear lots of rows of teeth. And they wear it out. It's kind of like a conveyor belt. And they scrape bacteria and algae off of rocks. And like if you look at it, it's like right in there. Oh, that's a terrible view. I'm going to have to find you a video. Okay? Their shells are formed by secretions in the mantle. And it's made out of calcium carbonate. So all those lovely little shells that you like to pick up on the beach are from mollusks. Now, there's 7 major classes of mollusks, and some of them are just boring, like worm-like, chitons, tough shells. Snails and slugs doesn't sound exciting, but let me tell you, I'm about to blow your mind. Bivalves, I feel like you already know about. Clams, mussels, and oysters, and cephalopods, octopus, and squid, I feel like you already know about. So let's get to town on gastropods. Class Gastropodia is the largest of all the mollusk classes. There are over 70,000 named species, and they include snails, slugs, sea hares, sea slugs, and sea butterflies. That's right, I said sea butterfly. And yeah, they lack a shell. And oh my gosh, are they not some of the prettiest creatures you've ever seen in your life? These are slugs. Yep, look at that one. Oh, yeah. Oh, yep. Oh, sea butterflies. Oh, look, he's got a shell. This one right here. But this one right here does not. And oh, who could forget the one that looks like a bunny? That's right, it looks like a bunny, and I do have a video for you for this. So, now those little things that are ears, not really ears, yeah. Yeah, they really are cute. Not gonna lie. Totes adorbs, right? And I cannot let you get through my class without learning about sea hares. I know you saw that, and that's right. I'm totally showing it to you.
One of the kinkiest animals on the planet might be the California brown sea hare, a sea slug with gigantic neurons. I'm Anna Rothschild, and this is Gross Science. The California brown sea hare, also called Aplysia californica, is a type of sea slug that lives off the coast of California and in parts of northern Mexico. It eats algae that makes it pretty toxic, so it doesn't have a ton of natural predators. However, if another animal does happen to spook it, the sea hare squirts sticky, bright purple ink at its assailant, which personally is a defense mechanism that I would love to have. But these guys do more than just eat algae and squirt ink. They also have quite edgy sex. Aplysia are hermaphrodites and have both male and female reproductive organs. When they mate, they sometimes form long mating chains of up to 20 individuals.
Whoa.
The sea hare at the front of the chain acts as a female, and the one at the back of the chain acts as a male. But all the sea slugs in between act as both males and females. They inseminate the partner in front of them while receiving sperm from the one behind. It's really quite a time saver when you think about it. Anyway, scientists get pretty excited about Aplysia. Not so much for their mating habits, but more for their brains. The sea hare's nervous system is made up of a small number of very large neurons, making Aplysia californica an excellent neuroscience test subject. In fact, the scientist Eric Kandel used Aplysia to study how memories are stored. And thanks to that kinky little sea slug, he won a Nobel Prize for his work. You. Got a question about Aplysia? Let me know in the comments.
So yeah, sea hares. Okay, So those are the ones that don't have a shell. Let's talk about the ones that do have a shell. So most of them have what's called a univalve shell, and it can be coiled or it can be uncoiled. And the apex is the oldest and smallest of the whorls. Okay, hint, hint, wink, wink, star, underline. An example of a test question might be, what is the oldest part of a gastropod? And you'd be like, easy peasy. It's that apex. It's the teeny tiniest little whorl at the top. Now, shells can coil to the right or to the left, and that is totally genetically controlled by their parents. Now, let's talk about this. I highly recommend that you copy and paste this picture right here and stick it in your notes. Or draw it and label it and all that goodness. You're going to be tested on it. Okay? So the apex is the smallest whorl. It's the first one to form. The aperture is the opening, and that's where the little creature would be. Now, the operculum is the trapdoor of the shell. Now, the operculum is a body part of the sea creature. So, like right here, see in the opening right there, there's that hard part. That is the operculum. So, technically, if you're looking at an empty shell, there is no operculum. All right. The whorls are complete rotations of the shell's spiral, and the spire is the part of the shell above the body whorl. So, lots of information to learn about shells right there. I didn't make you learn all of it, but I do want you to know apex, aperture, operculum, whorl, and spire. Now, if they have the operculum, they're hiding inside, and it literally like shuts it off from the rest of the world. It's a really good defense mechanism. And then, don't forget that gastropods are herbivores, and they feed by scraping off algae using their radula. And some are scavengers of dead organisms, and others are carnivores that drill into other mollusks. So if you've ever found a shell with this teeny tiny hole in it, that's how he died. He got eaten by his cousin. For shame. Alright, so I think that's enough for today. Okay, I lied. You can't be done without seeing the radula in action. This like conveyor belt of like teeth in its mouth. And it's so freaking cool. Look. Okay, it really doesn't make that sound effect, but I do. Alright, you can also see how he's walking with his little muscular foot. Aw, he's so freaking cute. Yeah, I like them. Okay, so now you got to see it. The foot, the radula. So I really hope you enjoyed learning about gastropods. They're some of my favorite sea creatures. You know, how could you not like the sea hares and their bright pink ink and the sea snails and the sea slugs that everyone thinks are going to be so gross, but they're actually really cool. And the sea bunny, I mean, come on. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this section of notes, and see you next class.